We had let our system decay. We had let our system decay to the point where it no longer served us. We'd allowed greed, corruption, capitalism to seep into the veins of our society and tell us what it thinks is important. We'd left behind education for schooling. We'd become numbers. We'd become marks. We'd become slaves to our own system. And once we realized it, once we really looked at what we'd become, we were forced to look back and retaliate in disgust and point the finger. But pointing the finger never solved any problems. It only led to more. So we became stuck in this society that we had created, stuck in this society that we had allowed to form. And on top of that, a few selfish, greedy individuals decided that they were going to put their hand in the cookie jar a little deeper than the rest of us. Now, there are a lot of selfish people out there in the world, a lot of greedy individuals who could care less about the average person. And it may appear that these people are plentiful and in majority. But when we look at the numbers, you see that the only reason that these people have so much exposure is because these are the people who are on the headlines. These are the people who run the countries. These are the people who run our banks. These are the CEOs of the biggest companies in the world. These are the sociopaths of the world. The people who are willing to be in charge and willing to tread on others to get to where they need to be. And failing to see that humans are humans, regardless of financial status, regardless of race, regardless of beliefs. But will we ever really see it that way? And that's the biggest question we have to ask ourselves. Can we ever get past it? The way I see it, we have a major hurdle to overcome. And this hurdle is the fact that we need leadership. We need people in charge to run our country. I know some people would argue that point. I know a lot of people would argue that point. I was once of the belief system that we could revert back to an older way of counseling ourselves, of community organization and small groups. But even in some of the most ancient cultures and some of the smallest cultures, we have elders, we have wise men, we have medicine men. These are the chieftains that helped us through our hard times. These are the people who took the time to do the research into how to help one another. Politicians are our modern-day shamans. Unfortunately, they haven't lived up to the title in any way whatsoever. The values that we've put on society force those in charge to cater to those particular values. And unfortunately, it seems that all people want is more money. People talk about injustice. They talk about unfairness. They talk about class separation. But really what it comes down to is people feel like they're not getting a big enough piece of the pie. And the problem lies is when people do get a bigger piece of the pie, they're often willing to step out of the game and not any longer speak their mind. They may see injustice going on around them. They may see poor around them. But they're happy, they're content, and all of a sudden nothing matters anymore. A person who has a perfect health care may think that Obamacare is the end of the world. A person who can't afford a doctor and that it benefits may think that it's a saving grace. Somewhere in between is always the answer. But every person wants to point the finger and say yes or no without considering all the implications of every fact. And the problem is, as a society, we can't. We can't look at every issue and understand every issue, no matter how hard we try. We're all full of shit in that regard. We all want to think that our opinions matter. But they really only matter to us. In the big picture, we're stuck with our own views, our own body, our own values, and those can't be imposed or expressed upon any other person. People may accept one another's values, and we may appear on the surface to be tolerant, but deep underneath, people have very strong reservations about trusting others who don't think the way they think. So we have a hierarchy. We have a class of individuals on top who are taking much more than they deserve. The average CEO making 380 times more than their average employee. Not their lowest paid employee, but their average employee. And that's the average CEO. When we point at individual politicians, it makes us feel better because they have a face, they have an image, they have words that we can attack. This is why the president has always been the scapegoat for attack. I take it to the front lines. The front lines are Congress. Who's passing the bills? Who's doing most of the damage on society? And who's inspiring some of these bad ideas that we seem to think are going to solve our nation's problem? And we often don't know. They're faceless cowards. They're people who hide behind the guise of corporations and entities. People who don't care if people die as long as they get their paycheck. But we blame those with money for the biggest problems. And the problem is not the money, nor the people who have the money. It's the people that make decisions with what to do with that money. We have to realize that with the amount of financing, backing, science, technology that we have right now, throw all the money aside. It's all about resources. And with the amount of resources we're spending on war in the U.S. alone, which I know is well over half of our entire budget, all it's doing is preventing us from being overrun by the rest of the world that's trying to balance out the tables. Now I'll no longer engage in debates about whether China has more power than the U.S. or which country is going to rise up and conquer. In the end, we're all one country now. There is no more dominate and run a country. The people of each country have to be willing participants in any type of takeover. In other words, if China or Russia decided to take over the U.S., there wouldn't be a giant ground battle. This isn't going to be the Wolverines here, Red Dawn style. We're talking about a very slow financial trickle to where the tables have turned and the power has shifted. We won't have Chinese leaders in this country. We will have our normal representatives that are funded by external sources. The money trail, it's so easy to follow. And this is what gets people really angry online and on YouTube and on certain channels and websites where they've dedicated thousands of hours of manpower and research into exposing these financiers of war. And I appreciate all the efforts people have put into that, because without that, we wouldn't be able to really assess the damage that has been done. Without people who have dug all of these manuscripts and military records and detailed documents expressing what the government's done, without people digging these things out, we may never have known. But now that we do know, digging out further papers doesn't seem to do us any good. In other words, the paper trail has been traced to its source, which is corruption. The corruption is based on a desire for money. The money's not going away. Money has become an entity. It has its own aura, its own spirit, its own essence. The way I see it is money is alive. And it very well is alive, because it's the expression of the labor that we've put into or taken out of the system that we live in. And my life has become a lot easier since I stopped blaming leaders for the big problems that we have. This is a very complicated issue that involves millions of individuals in charge and billions of individuals who are part of the system. We're all cogs in the wheel. Now, a person may want to blame, let's say, a company for what it's doing to the environment or what it's doing to the economy. But when you really break it down, why is the CEO making decisions that they make? Because they have to answer to the board of directors, which has to answer to the shareholders. And the shareholders are you and me, average people. people who have bought stocks in a company and want it to succeed. So I'll hear one person on one hand complaining about a company who's dumping toxic waste, but they have stock in that particular company. It's a vicious circle, and a person may not even realize that they're buying into the very companies that they despise. Big corporations that we don't like anymore have a very sly way of changing their names and their associations, buying out smaller companies. You want to go to the store and buy some organic peanut butter? Go for it. You don't know who makes that. Doesn't matter what little farm it says on the package anymore. Organic is bought out by the USDA. The word organic means nothing now. You could be using illegal pesticides for all we know. You can use oil-based fertilizers and pesticides in organic food now. That's just one example of laws that have been implemented that make us feel overwhelmed. Like we can't get any truth or honesty out of anyone anymore. Like people are lying to us everywhere we turn. I'd like to say that I don't see the world that way. I think that people lie out of fear, and it's usually out of fear of their peers or fear of their subjects in the sense of leadership. The fear of someone lashing out because they don't understand. You know why leaders have always been so reluctant in this country, in the United States, to make any big changes? Because anytime they do, the media whips up a frenzy, throws it out of proportions, says, look at what they're doing. They're trying to change the whole U.S. People say they want change. Then somebody tries to make a change, and they say, no, things are fine the way they are. It doesn't mean that any individual situation is right or wrong. It just means that everyone is trapped. The wheels are slowing. Spokes in the wheel now that it can't even turn anymore. And it's coming to a grinding halt. I don't know what we're going to do about it. I don't know how we're going to get out of it. I think this is a very exciting time to live. I think that the world is an amazing place. And living in this day and age, I couldn't think of a better time, because I want to kind of see how this happens. It's like that old line from, I think it was an Everclear song. What does he say? Leave the world behind, swim out past the breakers, and watch the world die. Sometimes I feel like that, but I don't want to swim out past the breakers. I want to be part of the solution if I can, but I know when to throw in the towel. So while I may be a very tolerant person, and I may be a pretty easygoing person, I think, on most subjects, and I try to be open and honest about things, but I'm a realist, and I am I am prepared for the end of the world, if you will. I'm not afraid for something big to happen. I think in my heart of hearts, I believe that it has to get worse before it gets better, you know? We're in the calm before the storm, if you will, right now. Now, I know some people think that it feels like a storm right now, but just realize that that's only the way you view it, depending on what you put yourself into. Now, if you live out in the woods right now and you don't have the internet, the world's not going to feel like it's ending to you. If you live in the middle of this city in downtown LA and you are constantly on the web looking for the most apocalyptic findings, it's going to seem like the world's coming to an end to you. So it's really all perspective. It really is. So I prefer to keep my body in the city and my mind of the country, in the country, if you will. Keep my mind in that relaxed state and realize that any type of chaos that I'm creating is just that, chaos that I'm creating within my own mind. And my only hopes is that more people realize that and think rationally, because we don't really know. We just don't know where we're going with this, but we have to put in some sort of an effort and figure out what the hell we're going to do about it. We're all spinning our wheels here, folks, trying to figure out what the hell we're going to do and how we're going to save our country, how we're going to save our world. I don't even know if it's possible, but I know that being aware is important. Being aware we're all part of the problem is even more important. And not letting it get to you is pretty damn important too. So, hope you all have a great day. Peace and love.